Mr. President, Mr. Minister, I would like to thank the speakers for their vision of the interrelationship between food security and the conflict. The organizers of today's debate propose to consider these issues in a broader sense, through the influence of regional conflicts on the global food market and supply chains. If we are to discuss the problems in such a situation, we should not ignore the most obvious example, which was unleashed on February 28th by the United States and Israel, the aggression against Iran. The subsequent escalation put the normal functioning of one of the most important arteries of the world trade, the Strait, and provoked a powerful logistical shock, the consequences of which are felt far beyond the borders of the Middle East. We are not only talking about the current increase in transportation. Future seed companies in import-dependent countries of Africa and Asia are under serious threat due to the increase in valuable energy resources and fertilizers. The World Trade Organization in particular warns that tens of millions of people may face starvation as a result. Mr. President, we are closely monitoring the work of the target group on the Ornstein Strait, coordinated by the UNOCE Directorate. Of course, we cannot ignore the fact that it, as one of the sources of inspiration for new mechanisms, calls the so-called Black Sea Initiative. We believe it is necessary to avoid too free interpretation of this experience. The mechanism, which was presented as humanitarian, turned out to be extremely one-sided. Therefore, to present it as an undisputed history of success and a ready-made model for the watermelon would be at least negligible. Mr. President, a significant factor in the imbalance of the world's food markets, which our Western colleagues prefer to keep silent about, is associated with the illegal, one-sided restrictive measures adopted by the Security Council. In this regard, the flagship report on the situation in the food security and food security in the world for 2025 is indicative. Its authors stated that the energy markets, food, and fertilizers were destabilized, including by anti-Russian sanctions. Last year, we drew the attention of the Council to the conclusion of this report and to the attempt of a number of Western delegations to dispute the very emergence of appropriate estimates in UNO analysis. On this basis, it should be noted that in a similar report published in July of 2026, no words were said about the factor of anti-Russian sanctions. What has changed? Objective economic data, or an approach to which of them is politically convenient to mention? This is a rhetorical question. The failure of one-sided measures of coercion was recognized by the General Secretary in his flagship report for 2025. It says directly that such restrictions affect not only vulnerable states, but also violate the regional and global supply chains, including in the field of agriculture and food. On this background, the attempts to impose responsibility on Russia in the volatile scene of the global food markets seem incapable. Moreover, it is strange to hear such accusations now, when the Kiev regime, using NATO and EU countries' unmanned systems and intelligence data, is building up drone attacks on civilian ships in the Azov and Black Sea waters. In July alone, more than 100 such attacks on commercial ships with Russian agricultural products were recorded. These strikes by the USSR, devoid of military significance, violate international law and have already caused delays in the supply of grain, oil, and food to international importers. It is obvious that we are talking about the cynical campaign of Kiev aimed at provoking chaos in the global food market, given that Ukraine's share in the global food production is small, no matter how hard the Kiev regime tries to prove it. The actions of the Zelensky regime, which has adopted the tactics of total destruction of ships under any flags in the Azov and Black Sea waters, have led to the complication of shipping operations. The first measure of stabilization should be not any kind of deals on an honest basis, without a guarantee of their implementation by Kiev, but the cessation of destabilizing steps by Ukraine and the sabotage and terrorist activity against civilian ships, as well as the obstruction of the operation of international trade routes. Since our Western colleagues are so happy for the protection of global trade routes, they should sober up their watchdogs in Kiev, who pour oil into the fire of food supply. We, as confirmed by the President of Russia on August 22nd, will solve the current problems with the export of grain and provide the world market with a potential supply of at least 60 million tons this year. Mr. Chairman, 8 years ago, the Council adopted Resolution 2417. Its subject is quite specific: food insecurity and the threat of starvation in situations of armed conflict. It was not created as a universal monitoring mechanism for any secondary consequences of regional crises for world prices, energy, and international trade. Therefore, attempts to extensively interpret its position and spread it to any global economic shocks are fraught with the dilution of the agreed item of the resolution and further politicization of issues that should be comprehensively considered by the profile structure of the Council. It is not visible the need to create an additional mechanism for early warning under the aegis of the Council. The issue is not in the lack of tools, but in the readiness to use what is already available in due time and inadvertently. If someone needs a clear example of what kind of situations the Resolution 2417 is intended for, there is no need to go far. This is the gas sector. Despite some improvements in recent months, the situation there remains critical. According to the latest estimates, more than 1.4 million people, or 67% of the gas population, are experiencing acute food shortages, which are alarming on the western bank of the Jordan River. Operations of the Israeli forces, violence by the settlers, restrictions on movement and access to the land undermine the ability of the Palestinians to provide themselves with food on their own. According to the FAO, more than 72,000 farms, that is, almost two-thirds, need emergency assistance. It is in Palestine that the Council should strive to implement the Resolution 2417. The same logic applies to Haiti, Yemen, Somalia, and Sudan. Mr. Chairman, emergency food assistance is extremely important, but it should not become a constant model of the existence of crisis states. It is necessary to help countries restore their own agricultural production and strengthen their ability to provide food for the population on their own. Russia, on the other hand, remains a world resident and a reliable supplier of agricultural products to foreign markets, providing a contribution to the achievement of global food security. In 2025, more than 160 countries have exported Russian agricultural products. A considerable share of deliveries are made without immediate food and technical assistance to the most in-demand states, including those affected by the conflict. This year, our exports to the EU have already exceeded $33 million, and in the last 5 years, their volume has exceeded $250 million. Russian aid was sent to Afghanistan, Africa, Syria, Palestine, Yemen, Myanmar, and other states. We are developing cooperation with FAO. Our country has financed projects to combat slavery and restore agriculture in East Africa, support for Syrian farmers, and the creation of climate-sustainable agro-systems in Central Asia and in the Sahel region. Mr. President, the Resolution 2417 does not require any extensive interpretation or new mechanisms. It requires a conscientious application where the conflict is really a problem for the city. Instead of politicizing this issue, the international community should seek to end the conflict, increase humanitarian aid, and assist the affected countries in restoring their own agriculture. And above all, we should not create new crises so that we do not have to look for mechanisms to overcome their consequences. Thank you.